Instagram, the Instagram account of Sam YG. It's a better photo than mine, which is why I showed it first, and I'll also share my photo as well. That's mine. They were not, siguro mas maaga yung dating ko, or not the same day actually, because my photo was taken a few weeks ago. I was not able to deliver the speech on this as there were other matters on the floor at that time. But anyway, Your Honors, this is in our airport, and I was shocked to see groups of Filipinos in complete PPE. So I asked around, and I was also rushing to get to my to line up and get to my gate on time. So I wasn't able to converse with them. Sometimes we have time to take pictures, chat with them, but unfortunately that wasn't one of those days. So I just asked around and was told later on that they are OFWs. Your Honor, I'd like to point out they are in complete PPE, including the footsies that you only see in operating rooms. It's like the height of ridiculousness that they have to wear those footsies because they're walking around the whole airport where thousands of people enter, walk around every day. So there is nothing hygienic about being in footsies as opposed to being in the regular rubber shoes or walking shoes. So the first thing that came to my mind was to inform Secretary Toots Ople. She's a friend, and so I messaged her and I asked her if she's aware of any requirement for our departing OFWs to be in PPE. Sabi niya, parang wala naman, but she will check, and I sent her these photos. Tingnan niyo naman, Madam President, may gloves pa. Nakakaiyak. Then may face shield pa. You know, Your Honors, I'd like to put context here. I attended, my very first conference since the pandemic started was when I represented the Senate in November in the IPU, the Interparliamentary Union that was held in Spain. And if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not confusing the dates, no? But on my way back, the airline was handing out face shields to me and all the other passengers, and I had to tell the airline attendant, this was November, Your Honor, so I hope my dates are right. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, that there is no longer any face shield requirement, no? If I'm not mistaken, and I'm asking my staff to check, that was November of last year. And they were not properly informed. They were handing the passengers, including me, anyone returning to the Philippines. So, hindi magandang communication sa kanila na wala ng face shield requirement. In fairness to the airline, they were, I guess, kind enough to provide us with face shields, thinking that it is requirement. Madam President, that was end of last year. Mag-iisang taon na, and here we have our OFWs naka-full PPE with face shield, footsies, and gloves. It's ridiculous, Your Honors. I feel so bad for them because it is not comfortable wearing this, and that's why tayo hangang-hanga tayo sa mga doktor, no, that they had to wear this, and I'm not sure what the protocols are now, but our OFWs are wearing it when they travel. Ang hirap kaya magbanyo na ganyan ang suot mo. Isipin lang natin yon, dun pa lang. And I wonder how much they were charged to comply with whoever's requirement this is. So, I move on to I'd like to put on record some information that I've gathered on the requirements in different countries. In the UAE, the requirement is as follows. Vaccination certificate containing a QR code. They are not required to present a negative result of RT-PCR test for COVID. Wala nang ang PCR test na result na papakita tapos may PPE papunta doon. To be clear, hindi ho ako 100% sure kung saan sila papunta, no? But most of our OFWs go to these areas. So, you know, we can kind of assume that some of these pictures I have their destination is one of these areas. Kuwait, travelers are no longer required to get tested for COVID-19 before traveling to Kuwait. The pre-departure testing requirement has been removed. And then, for Riyadh, all non-Saudis who have not been vaccinated against COVID must abide by the following institutional quarantine procedures for 7 days. So there's quarantine. All non-Saudis who are immunized are allowed to enter Saudi without the need for a quarantine period, provided that they present an official vaccination certificate and submit a negative PCR. Wala ako nakikitang nakalista dito na naka-full PPE sila, Your Honor. Qatar, have I read Qatar? I've read Qatar. I've read it? Okay. Meron din akong Hong Kong. I'm just assuming that because this was my photos at least were, I believe, in the evening, so usually ang palabas nun are the countries I've mentioned. But in Hong Kong, there are quarantine measures, negative PCR, confirmation of a room reservation, kasi as you know, sa Hong Kong, merong quarantine requirement, although I just read in the papers that they're planning to make it home-based. Again, there's no PPE requirement, Your Honor. So, just to complete the information, not just information, but I'd like to spread into the record one more thing. Bear with me, Your Honors. I'm going through these lengthy notes that I have. Okay. It will be, the records will reflect, Your Honors, that I had the opportunity to interpellate when our colleague, Senator Tulfo, had a privileged speech on migrant workers. And at that point, I mentioned the United Nations Conventions on the Protection of the Rights of all migrant workers and members of their families. I'd like to include in this speech Article 7, and this Article 7 of the said convention states, state parties undertake in accordance with the international instruments concerning human rights to respect and to ensure to all migrant workers and members of their families within their territory or subject to their jurisdiction the rights provided for in the present convention without distinction of any kind, such as to sex, race, color, language, religion, or conviction, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, or social origin, nationality, age, economic position, property, marital status, birth, or other status. I believe, Your Honor, that this is discrimination if in fact there is such a requirement. I am not saying there is a requirement, but I am just putting on record that we are protected by this convention, that if based on the rules for entering the countries that I mentioned, as I gathered from the website, are correct, I didn't see anything about Filipino OFW, other OFWs, or any other nationality entering their countries to be in full PPE. So, either there is discrimination against our own nationals, or may rumaraket. Merong nakikinabang, may nagte-take advantage ng COVID situation na pinipilit ang ating mga OFWs na maghirap kasi hindi ho madali magsuot ng ganyan at malamang magbayad. Wala na yata akong idadagdag. Let me just check. Actually, let me put on record Article 16 of the International Labor Organization, Article 16 on Occupational Safety and Health Convention of the ILO states, employers have duties concerning the provision and use of PPE at work. PPE should only be used as a last resort. If PPE is still needed after implementing other controls, employers must provide this for their workers free of charge. So, I'm just putting all of this on record para kung may maririnig akong mga palusot at dahilan na requirement yan, requirement ng kahit anong bansa o requirement ng kahit anong kumpanya na nag-recruit ng ating mga OFWs. Nilalagay ko na po yan sa record para klaro ang lahat. Finally, I think that is what I have for today, Your Honor. So I leave this to our better, more in-depth scrutiny. I hope we can help out our OFW so that they won't have to pay extra to travel for work, and they don't have to travel in this kind of discomfort, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. If I may make a manifestation, if indeed it was required by a government agency or an entity, I believe that we must find out, and perhaps during the hearings of the DOLE or other pertinent government agencies, we must find out, because definitely this would be an additional expense on the part of the overseas Filipinos. And secondly, I think it's clear discrimination. The OFW lane must be for expeditious processing for overseas Filipinos whom we call mga bayani. But to require them to look that way in that difficult situation, traveling such long hours, ano ba ho ang kaibahan ng OFW at ng nagabiyahing ibang Pilipino? Bakit sila ay ganyan ang suot kailangan kung minamandato ng anumang ahensya ng gobyerno? So these are basic questions I also want answered, and it is clear discriminatory at face value. Just looking at it. What is the difference? If you're OFW, you have to wear a PPN. If you're not, you don't need to wear. If there is such a memo, I cannot imagine. Someone must have told them. Our majority leader knows
Yes.
the PIDOS, right? All the departure orientation.
Yes.
I think we must find out soon, so that unnecessary expense must not be brought on our already beleaguered overseas Filipinos. So we thank the Senator from Taguig and Pateros for bringing this to our attention. And with that, Majority Leader, would you
Yes,
like to refer it?
Madam President,
Thank you.
before we refer this very important privilege, may I be allowed, with the indulgence of my colleagues here, if I'd be given some time to just ask some clarificatory questions, if the distinguished lady from Taguig would yield to some questions from this
Please
representation.
Of course, I will not. I cannot assure the majority floor leader that I have the answers. Most of the speech I delivered is based on my observation and some of the basic knowledge I have on the rights of migrant workers. But I'm very happy to hear out his Honor's questions, concerns, and comments.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam President, distinguished colleague, especially for rising today and raise this very alarming pictures, Madam President. Itong picture na ito, Madam President, parang nagpaalala sa atin doon sa privilege speech ni Senator Tulfo, doon sa mga videos na pinakita niya. Parang kumulo na naman yung dugo natin, Madam President, considering that we are considering our OFWs as our new heroes, Madam President. And on the onset, I'd like to congratulate our distinguished colleague, Senator Pia, for raising this issue. I have not heard of anything like this, Madam President, and I've been the chairperson of the Committee on Labor for about 6 years. And I share the sentiments of our Senate President Pro Tempore. Bakit kailangang pagsuotin sila ng ganito? And so, perhaps my first question, Madam President, distinguished colleague, is nung nakita niyo po ito at itong mga pictures na ipinakita po ninyo, nalaman po ba natin kung isang bansa o isang syudad sa mundo ang kanilang pupuntahan? Isa lang po ba? Or iba-iba rin po yung nabalitaan natin tungkol dito? If we have that information,
Yeah.
Madam President.
Mr. President, kasi nga nagmamadali na ako papunta din sa aking gate, no? So pinatanong ko na lang, and then as I recall, I was told na iba-iba ang destination nila. But they were all Middle East countries, yung naaalala ko. Yung ganun yung generalization. That's why I also don't want to take it, I don't want to mention a specific country kasi parang it wasn't that clear. But on that note, since one of the photos that I grabbed was from Sam YG, nag-abala naman si Sam YG in his caption to say that upon his own inquiry, they are seafarers. So, ito naman kasing kay Sam YG bago lang. Yung photos ko kasi was weeks ago pa. So, nagtanong din nung nakita ko yung kay Sam YG, sabi ko timing na rin na tagal na hong pending itong bala ko mag-privilege speech. So, nag-message na rin po ako sa kaibigan ko who works for the biggest seafarers union, AMUSOP, no? Unfortunately, as of this moment, hindi ko pa nakuha yung sagot niya. Kung meron siyang alam ng mga requirements na ganyan for seafarers.
Madam President, thank you. Isa sa mga grab ng aking atensyon, Madam President, kanina habang nagdi-deliver ng privilege speech ang ating kasamaan, Senator Pia, ay yung pong pagsusuot ng face shield. In fact, dito po kay Sam YG's Instagram account, at sabi nyo nga po, this is just recent, I suppose,
Yes.
nakasuot pa rin po ng face shield yung ating mga bagong bayani. Bakit ho kaya? May nabanggit po kaya? Or the distinguished lady made mention a while ago that she was able to talk to Secretary Toots Ople about this? Was there any talks about this particular incident that they would have to wear PPEs, including gloves? Kanina may nakita ho tayo naka-gloves, and then ito nga ho, pati face shields.
And just to show you na hindi nga ito recent, dala din ng ibang trabaho natin, August 23 pa ho itong text exchange namin ni Secretary Ople. Sagot naman siya kaagad, no, in fairness to the Secretary. Sabi niya, kung alam ko ba daw kung anong agency ito, and this is, I quote, definitely not a DMW and or a POEA policy. Yun ang sabi niya. Tapos sabi niya, baka ways ito to extract na naman money from our workers. So concerned na concerned din siya.
Yeah. With that, Madam President, and our Senate President Pro Tempore made mention about PIDOS kanina, yung pre-departure, and when we passed the Department of Migrant Workers Act, mas naging extensive ang ating orientation. In fact, full cycle yung reintegration natin, not just before they leave the country, even while they are there. Nagpasa din tayo ng OFW handbook, pati yung integration when they come back, what would happen if they needed to be repatriated by the government. So lahat po nandun, no? And I just would like to raise also early this year po yung sa Hong Kong experience, if I recall. Yung sa Hong Kong experience, there's a fifth wave COVID-19 cases brought about by Omicron variant. Meron pong mga reports doon na nabanggit din po that there were about 60 OFWs have tested positive for COVID-19, and some of them, Madam President, are actually staying in the streets because their employers would not allow them in their residences. So I'd like to raise this because I think it's important to note that every single OFW na lalabas ng bansa, dapat talagang na-orient ng maayos. Kasi kung ito ho, nakikita natin, nasa loob na ng ating airport, nakaganito, sa paningin pa lang, klarong-klaro, discrimination na po kaagad eh. Kasi hindi naman po ganyan eh. I mean, yung pupuntahan nila, alam natin, easily we can talk to our people there, yung ating embassy doon. Alam natin na hindi ganyan dumarating pag dun sa bansa na yun, pag dumarating yung mga turista, hindi naman nakaganyan. So bakit kailangan silang nakaganyan? So ang point ko lang, Madam President, is that this should be a concern on the part of the Department of Migrant Workers Department. Would you agree, distinguished colleague?
Definitely, Your Honors, Majority Floor Leader. It really is something that our Department of Migrant Workers should look into with haste. In fact, it's almost like I will throw back the question to His Honor because he may know more than me and maybe the presiding officer as well. Hindi ba dapat pag whole of government approach, I'm just wondering, wala ba man lang kahit isang opisyal sa airport na nakapansin nito? Kasi nga yung sa akin, inaamin ko po sa inyo, dear colleagues, na dala ng dami ng trabaho. Hindi ko pa talaga na schedule yung privilege speech, but the majority floor leader will attest to the fact that I've been wanting to deliver, and no fault on anybody. In fact, even on my part, I had to defend the Safe Pathways Bill. I had to also participate in the other interpellations. So I did this as soon as I could. But it makes you wonder, did anyone not notice it? Did anyone not care about the situation that our OFWs have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in the airport?
Unbelievable.
So let the record show that the gentleman raised his two hands, like in despair, two arms in despair. That's the meaning of the raising of his two hands.
And a big
Two arms
sigh.
And a sigh.
I just can't believe it, Madam President. And as I mentioned earlier, Madam President, what we have heard from the news, what happened in Hong Kong, let me point out that when we passed the Department of Migrant Workers Act, we placed a provision there, a provision there that would establish an action fund, agarang kalinga sa ating mga kababayang OFW. So dapat ito po ay napapakinabangan, and I'm looking forward to participating in the deliberation of this particular issue in our committee hearings, and even in the budget we will be asking this question. Madam President, perhaps may I ask the distinguished lady from Taguig Pateros, who is also a champion of, a health advocate, Madam President. She's very much aware of the different policies of different countries, yung mga natututunan natin, we talk about futures thinking, etc. May we ask if, as to how do we ensure, Madam President, that our OFWs are still protected despite the different health protocol of host countries?
That's a good question, Your Honor. I personally have always relied on international relations, whether these are defined by official agreements. And speaking of official, that's why I put on record this United Nations Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers. I'm sure there are others, but this is the one that I feel is very on point when it comes to their welfare and the obligation of signatories to take care of our OFWs, to care for them in the same way. Your Honor, let me emphasize, it should be the specific article that I mentioned,
Article
says
7.
without distinction of any kind, because of their color, their sex, their language. So I bank on that. And then also, Madam President, personal relationships, interpersonal relationships we have with those receiving countries. And that would include the representation we have in those countries by way, in terms of our having official representatives there, di ba, our ambassadors. Eventually, I think, and His Honor would know more than me, we're putting into place itong representatives of Department of, hindi na DOFEL, what do we call it, DFW?
Department of Migrant Workers.
DMW. So maybe His Honor can even share more of what he knows on that. Like, I don't know if there will be sharing of personnel or there will be dedicated personnel. Obviously, in receiving countries such as the Middle East, na napakaraming Pilipino doon, I would assume that we would also need more manpower to oversee and look out for them. And it makes me think, Your Honor, again, I'm not an expert, sa dami ng Pilipinong dumadating, how many entry points are there in the Middle East? Ganun ba kabigat to have like almost like a welcoming representative, to make sure that they landed okay? I don't know. I'm not like I said, I'm not an expert, but kung alam mo nang ganung kalaki ang may malalaking chances na meron dyan na first time bumiyahe, di ba? First time din na meron din dyan bumiyahe, napakabata, di ba? Parang sa akin nga, pag tinitingnan ko, parang wala pang 18, but maybe they're 20, 21, tapos mamamasukan sa personal home, hindi nga opisina. Ewan ko, gano'n ba kahirap doon na meron ding welcoming committee tayo to at least tell them na, okay ka na ba? 'Di ba? May susundo ba sa'yo? Maybe that's asking too much, but we're really talking about millions and millions of Filipinos who are entering. I'm sure we can easily get the data at the proper time, how many enter key cities, 'di ba? Ano yung mga 5 top entry points, 'di ba? Baka man lang doon pwede nang may makapansin naman na ba't kaya naka-PPE itong mga dumating na to? May may footsies pa. Naawa naman po ako dahil ano kaya itsura nila sa ibang tao na dumating sila na nakaganon? I'll be honest, Your Honor, I think you've heard me tell you this story. Kinakabahan ako bumiyahe dahil alam ko in other countries na wala nang mask mandate. And so I personally am afraid na mapi-peer pressure ako not to take off my mask, even though personally I feel more secure in close quarters na naka-mask. Pero napi-peer pressure ako kasi kahit ako, parang mako-conscious ako na naka-mask ako, lahat ng tao hindi naka-mask. Paano pa kaya yung naka-full PPE ka, dumating ka sa isang bansa, naka-full PPE ka, ano kaya feeling mo? Di ba yung naka-mask lang, parang I'm admitting na nangyari na po sa akin yun na yung inattendan kong conference, wala na talagang naka-mask. Talagang na-peer pressure na rin akong magtanggal ng mask.
Yung ganito, Madam President, you feel discriminated right away, Madam President. Wala ka pa dun sa pupuntahan mo, parang yung dignity of work, no? And you made mention about Article 7 dun sa International
UN Convention on the
no?
Protection
Without
of the Rights.
distinction of any kind.
Yes.
Parang nakakalungkot lang, Madam President. And again, parang ayaw na nating ungkatin kung tayo lang ba yung bansang ginaganito. Mas lalo sigurong masakit kung malaman natin na tayo lang.
Mr. President, if I may interrupt,
Yes.
I failed to include another article of the same convention that supports Article 7. Ito po yun. Article 25 states, migrant workers shall enjoy treatment not less favorable than that which applies to nationals of the state of employment in respect of remuneration and then it enumerates marami yan, other conditions of work. Pwede kong isama sa conditions of work, di ba yung pagbiyahe nila, naka-PPE silang pakahirap-hirap suotin para mag-CR ka, nakaganon ka. And then, hold on, Your Honor, baka I might have to add this. Anyway, I think that will suffice, Your Honor.
Yes, Madam President, again, the good thing about the passage of the Department of Migrant Workers is that right now, our OFWs are very much aware that there is now one house that they can go to, complain, ask for help, etc. Unlike before, if they go to Intramuros, sasabihin ng Dole, hindi, dun kayo sa Ortigas, dun sa POA. Pagdating dun sa POA, hindi kayo dito, dun kayo sa Department of Foreign Affairs, balik ulit kayo sa Rojas Boulevard at dun kayo pumunta. So at least ngayon ho, may isang bahay. But again, as I've been mentioning, and I sound like a broken record already, there's already one house right now who is responsible for all of this, and we have to find out from the Department of Migrant Workers what they are doing, what steps they are undertaking to assist and help our OFWs to comply with the necessary travel requirements of other countries. Regardless, Madam President, perhaps kahit na outside OFWs, no, regardless of purpose of travel, but let me not just put the weight on government agencies. Let's talk about itong mga ahensya, itong mga travel, itong mga what do you call this?
Recruitment agencies, travel
recruitment agencies, Madam President. Because is it possible that the agencies actually required the PPE requirement? Because, Madam President, hindi po sila pupunta ng ibang bansa as a group na ganyan na wala, I'm sure, na walang kasama o walang nag-a-assist from the manpower agency or recruitment agency. Kasi, I'm sure, nandyan sila, alam nila yan. At most likely, I'm just by looking at the pictures, most likely sila, because Secretary Ople is not even aware of this, most likely sila ang nag-require dito sa ating mga bagong bayani na magsuot nito, ipakitang ganyan sila, at parang, I'm sorry to say this, but parang nakakayurak ng dignidad ng pagiging isang worker na Pilipino, yung ginawa dito sa ating mga kababayan, Madam President.
Yes. Yes, Your Honor. I agree with you. Ang sakit sa dibdib na makita silang ganyan. Dagdag din natin, and later on I will personally message Sam YG dun sa nakatulong din po yung kanyang pag-post kasi may iba ding nag-comment doon na ang alam nga nila yung mga agency, yung binabanggit nyo ho, itong mga recruitment agencies, manpower agencies, ang nagre-require daw. So sana agad-agad maliwanagan tayo dyan, di ba?
Opo, at looking forward po tayo dyan, and ngayon pa lamang gusto na nating ipaabot sa ating mga kaibigan doon sa Department of Migrant Workers na bigyan tayo sana ng kalinawan mula po dito sa mga litrato at sa speech na ating narinig mula sa ating kasamahan mula sa Taguig Pateros. And one last thing that I'd like to raise, Madam President, when I was abroad just recently, like I can't remember, probably 2 months ago, Madam President, dun pa lang po sa mga airline companies, I was in Singapore last month, and 2 months ago I was in the States. Ganun po yung requirement sa atin, sabi po nung mga airline companies. In fact, sabi po nila, ang pinakamahigpit pasuking bansa ngayon, Pilipinas, ang daming requirement. And no question about it, sabi po nung mga nagtatrabaho doon sa airline company. Ito po ay Philippine Airlines, ito po ay Emirates, ito po ay iba-iba po, no? At yun nga ho, pagpapasok ka daw pong Pilipinas, kailangan, well, during that time, mga 2 months ago, yung sa States, parang they were requiring pa na kailangan meron kang PCR. I was in New York, I was having a hard time looking for a PCR test.
Yes.
So, kailangan mong gawin, etc. And tinanong ko po, no, yung mga ibang bansa ba ginagawa ito? No way. Hindi namin ginagawa. Nung nasa Dubai na po tayo, papuntang Pilipinas, ganun din po. And I am, God is my witness, papasok na po doon sa tube ng eroplano, may isang OFW sa isang gilid, umiiyak. Tinanong ko bakit? Kasi ang daming hinihinging requirement nitong airline company. So, nag-intervene po ako, tinanong ko bakit? At sabi po nung airline company, pinakita ko sa akin, ang haba-haba po nung list na requirement. Pabalik na yung kababayan natin sa Pilipinas, ganun kahaba po yung list. So, I was just wondering kung meron pong information ang ating kasamahan, Senator Cayetano, dito sa mga requirements nito, if it still exists. I don't even know if it still exists at this point in time, because pakita ko talagang parusa ito at pahirap, lalo na sa ating mga OFWs.
Your Honor, I am happy to respond to that. Ang masasabi ko, based din sa experience ko, merong mga bansa na wala ng requirement, merong ding matitindi pa ang requirement. Kasi this coming October, mag-a-attend po ako ng conference sa Finland. And then, hindi ko pa sure, naghahanap lang kami kung ano yung medyo mamura-mura na flight pabalik, no? Kasi wala naman diferensya, di ba? And nalaman ko na yung isang bansa, banggitin ko na, ang Spain, na I don't mind going there kasi nagpa-practice ako ng Spanish ko pag nandun ako, ang tawag doon, double booster ang requirement. So meron ding medyo matindi din ang requirement para pumasok. Compared to Finland, which is my main destination supposedly, wala na siyang requirement. So iba-iba din naman ang requirement, and I agree with His Honor na mukhang tayo ang isa sa marami, pero like I pointed out, yung Hong Kong nga may quarantine pa eh. So iba-iba din. And then, yun nga na-report ko na nanggaling na rin ho ako sa Korea to represent the country sa Asia Pacific Parliamentarian Global Conference. Nag-require din naman sila ng PCR test, Your Honor. So, iba-iba din naman, pero siguro ang isang maidadagdag ko sa usaping ito ay, kung medyo matindi ang requirements, at the very least, Your Honor, kailangan maliwanag, di ba? Kung ano yung mga requirements na yon, di ba? Para hindi dagdag sa pahirap. Ito nga ho ang naging isang karanasan ko. Nung nag-travel ako, I don't know which particular travel, pero pagbalik ko, yun na yung time na wala ng quarantine, di ba? Pag bumiyahe tayo ngayon, pagbalik mo sa Pilipinas, di ba, wala namang quarantine. Pero ang tinatak sa boarding pass ko, home quarantine. So tinatanong ko siya, boss, bakit may home quarantine to? Wala nang quarantine. Ang sungit niya sa akin. Ang sungit niya talaga sa akin. So tinigilan ko na lang kasi parang nagmamadali siya, marami pang nasa likod ko. Pero sabi ko, kawawa naman yung, ako alam kong no quarantine kasi alam nyo naman ako, nag-check talaga ako sa IATF directly, tinatawagan ko sila. Paano naman yung mga kababayan natin na walang kilala, and alam nila walang quarantine, biglang tinatakan yung boarding pass mo na with quarantine. And guess what, Your Honor, nangyari yon a few months ago pa, matagal na tayong walang quarantine, di ba? Nangyari sa anak ko nung bumiyahe siya, pagbalik niya, less than a month ago. Sabi niya, Mom, tinatakan ng home quarantine yung aking boarding pass. Hello! Halos 6 months or more na tayong walang quarantine pero tinatakan ng ganun. So sabi ko, grabe naman tayo. Sabi ko, ano ba yon yung stamp pad na yon? Gusto lang gamitin? So doon ako naaawa. Pampadagdag talagang litong-lito na siguro yung mga kababayan natin sa ganyang mga policies. Basta sana yung maliwanag lang.
And maybe, Madam President, distinguished colleague, when we tackle this particular issue in a committee hearing, let's also invite representatives from our airport,
Yes.
airport officials, no? Kasi napakahalaga po nito. And again, Madam President, just to make my final point, the Department of Migrant Workers should be on top of this. May isa na hong tahanan para sa ating mga OFWs. Ang mga nakita nating larawan dito sa bulwagang ito ay hindi nakakatuwa, hindi acceptable, at nakakababa ng dignidad ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino na nagbabanat ng buto, naghahanap ng greener pasture to support their loved ones and family. I hope also, Madam President, that the DMW would look into the accountability of our manpower agencies, our recruitment agencies. Pag aalis po sila, ma-assist man lang. I'm sure there is a mechanism there that they should be able to assist our OFWs leaving the country, and hindi sila nire-require ng mga hindi naman na kailangan na requirements. And nabanggit nyo nga, baka mamaya racket ito nung mga manning agencies at mga recruitment agencies para additional kita rin naman nila ito. Kasi parang alam naman natin, yung face shield pa lang, napakatagal na noon, panahon pa ng noon
Parang
pa.
it was a lifetime ago nung naka-face shield pa tayo, right?
Exactly, and para makita natin yung mga kasama natin na ganito, alam naman natin, Madam President, what they're going to do outside this country. Hindi sila magbabakasyon, magbabanat ng buto, magsasakripisyo ng hindi kayang pantayang sakripisyo yung gagawin nila para sa kanilang mahal sa buhay. Tapos kakayanin pa natin ganito. So again, Madam President, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our distinguished colleague, Senator Cayetano, for raising this very important issue. I would be more than willing to participate in the coming hearings that will be conducted by the Committee on Migrant Workers. So again, thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, distinguished colleague. At this juncture, Madam President, I move that we recognize the chairperson of the Committee on Migrant Workers, Senator Raffy Tulfo.
Senator Raffy Tulfo is recognized.